So today is going to be quite a long video, guys, so get your beverage ready, whatever you want, maybe a beer, maybe a soda, maybe some water or some tea, whatever you like to accompany my videos, because this one is going to be quite extensive. What's up, creators? I hope you're doing well. I'm Tony Fuentes. Welcome back to my channel. And if we're just meeting, I post tutorials on video and photo editing. So if you like those type of things, consider hitting the subscribe button down here and notification bell so you can notify when I upload every single video. Okay, today we're returning to the Like series, which is a series of videos where we break down the styles of famous YouTubers, photographers, Instagrammers, or just creators and try to replicate their style in post-edition. And the style that we're going to break down today is Paola MONARIS Franco, one of my favorite creators of all time. So a couple of years ago, I made a tutorial about how to edit like MONARIS. I'll link it up here in the cards in case you want to check it out. So why do it again? First of all, her style changes. That video was from 2020 and her style has changed quite a bit ever since. And secondly, because I love her style and I always like to replicate the style of famous creators that I like. Now, the purpose of this tutorial is for you guys to understand how to observe color grading and how to recreate those types of looks in post-edition in order for you guys to know more about Lightroom or Premiere Pro or whatever program we're using. So today we're going to concentrate in photos, so it's going to be Lightroom. So how does this work? First of all, we're going to jump into Instagram, break down their style, check out with which camera that she shoots her photographs, in which lighting situations, which ambient, how she color grades, and then we're going to apply all that knowledge in Lightroom to create a base preset in a photo and then edit a couple of photos, editing with that preset to see how it performs. So having said that, let's jump into Instagram and start breaking down her style. So this is MONARIS' profile on Instagram, MONARIS_. If you want to go and support her and join her 366,000 subscribers or followers, that's just outstanding. And as we can see, she's a Sony Alpha ambassador and a Lightroom ambassador. That's just a credit to her work, just some accolades. Now, if you want to achieve her precise look, remember to go and support her. She sells her presets in her bio site over here. Just click it and then it will redirect you to her store. Over here, you can buy her presets. And just remember that the purpose of this tutorial isn't for you guys to go stealing the styles of every single creator. It's more so the process, learning how to achieve certain color grades or certain looks within Lightroom. So first of all, gear. How does she shoot her photographs? She's a Sony ambassador, so she has a wide range of Sony lenses and Sony cameras to use at her disposal. She shoots with the A7R series, which are dedicated to photo, whether it be the A7R3 or the A7R4 that has a 61 megapixel sensor. Now, talking about lenses, she talks about so many times about the 16-35, the 24-70, and the 70-200 as being the most versatile lenses that she has, but she always loves to use the 50mm or a 35mm, maybe an 85mm to capture different types of shots. So she has basically all types of lenses that Sony offers at her disposal. Now, how does she shoot her photographs and at what time of day? Normally, well, she lives in New York, so most of her shots, as we can see on her feed over here, are shot in a very urban scene in maybe New York, or maybe some exceptions when she's traveling abroad. But most of the cases she shoots at New York, maybe in an overcast day or at night or at the interior of maybe shops or the subway or in a very rainy day. So the mood that she always tries to give is a very cinematic but moody vibe. Talking about moody days, of course. Okay, now down to occurring. Looking at these 9 photos from the start, we can see that there are a lot of constants in her style. It does look like a very curated feed, but we do see different types of color grading. For example, this is a very teal and orange look that we can see over here. This other, it's more over dark blue with yellows in the highlights. And then we have different variants from their style. So what I think we're going to do is create a base preset and then we're going to create different variants from that style. Now, starting off with the overall exposure and contrast that she uses. Now, overcast days normally are very white. The sky is very bright, so we lose a lot of information in the highlights. Therefore, this building in the back, we wouldn't be able to see it in a normal overcast day. But thanks to the power of post-editing, of raw photos, we have a lot of dynamic range in our shots and we can bring all those highlights and whites back in post-edition. So right here what I'm looking at is that we don't have any pure white on this image. Look at the cursor of the mouse, which is completely white, and the sky, it isn't anywhere near. So she's bringing down the highlights and the whites, so we have a lot more information in the brightest parts of our image. If she didn't do that, maybe the suspended cables over here of the Brooklyn Bridge, we wouldn't be able to notice the difference between them and the background. They would be lost in the overall overexposed parts of the image. Next up, what does she do with the shadows? Now the shadows are brought back just a little bit, therefore we can see we have a lot of information in the dark part of the shirt of this old man, but still she retains a lot of contrast in the image by the blacks don't raising it too much. We can see over here that the blacks, well, they're just a bit raised but not too much, therefore we have a very nice black roll on our image. Now bringing out the highlights is something that she does basically in every single photo. Here we can see again, and there's a lot of information in the mountains in the back, and the sky has a lot of information as well, meaning that she's bringing down the whites and the highlights. Also, she's bringing up the shadows, therefore we have a lot of information in the shadows in most of the images. There are some cases, for example in this one, that we're losing a lot of information in the shadows because she's going for a more contrasty style. Okay, so in essence, that's what we want to do in the overall exposure and contrast, the basic corrections. We also want to bring down a bit of the sharpness in the texture and clarity, so we have a more of a cinematic look. Normally, digital sensors from cameras over sharpen the images, so what we want to do is bring that a little bit down to reference the cameras from the Cine line, which are a bit more soft in the overall image. So that's something I want to keep an eye on. Okay, so let's start off by breaking down the color grading. Back to this image, you can see that the sky obviously has, in this case, a very yellowish cast to it. Now this isn't natural, guys, this is done in post edition. And then we can see obviously in the shadows that in this image she has a very bluish tone in the shadows. Now this is done maybe in the tone curves, or maybe you can do it in color grading, so we're gonna keep an eye on that one. Once again, over here the midtones, which would be composing this eye beam, would be changing towards the teal looks or the aquas. That's why they're completely blue and everything in the image is completely blue. In this image we can see once again that flatness that she has on her contrast. That's why the shadow of the hat of this man over here is barely noticeable. So she's bringing up the shadows, so we have a lot more information in over here. It's a subway, the lights are very harsh, and she's really trying to minimize the overall contrast on this image. That's why the shadow is barely noticeable, and also the shadows over here of this railway are very noticeable. Just bringing down the highlights and bringing up the shadows, so she has a lot more information. Now one thing that I can notice in these set of images, well, they're very from different scenarios. This one is shot outside, these ones are shot in the metro inside, or the subway if you want to call it like that. But you can see the color grading where she's gone. Now the trains in the underground, subway, metro, whatever you want to call it in New York, well, they're silver, they're not aqua like in here. This is telling me that she's adding an aqua tone into the midtones or into the shadows of this image. So we have this aqua teal look in the midtones of our image. Now this style is very desaturated. Once again, these blues or greens, whichever color it is, it's basically completely gone, desaturated. And then we can see that the blues over here are tending towards the aquas. Meanwhile, the oranges, they're a bit more vibrant. This is an indication that she's moving around camera calibration. So we're going to jump into camera calibration in the tutorial. Now this first image that we analyzed could be classified as a yellow versus cobalt. Now these two colors, well, this dark blue and this very vivid yellow, are direct opposites in the color wheel. So she's working with complementary colors or color contrast. So this is one of her styles, the blues or very dark blues in the shadows and in the midtones, and then she goes with a very yellowish tone in the highlights. So that's one style or one variety that we're gonna try to replicate. Next up we have this one, which is a very teal look. You can see that the blues in this set of images aren't as dark, aren't as deep as in the previous image. These ones are more towards the teal or aquas. And we have, yes, once again, that yellowish vibe in the highlights. Now, another thing that we can notice in this set, besides the overall teal cast that it has all over the image, is that the yellows are very poppy. They're popping up a lot more. You can see over here in the number plates, in the umbrellas, in the lines in the metro. This is an indication that in camera calibration, she's adding some positive red and adding some saturation to it to make them pop. Now, they're not turning them towards the oranges or towards the reds. They're just making them a lot more saturated. So that's one thing that we have to remember. This could be the second variety on her style. This is going to be the teal and orange look from MONARIS. So we have the cobalt versus yellow, and then we have the teal versus yellow. So those are two styles that we want to replicate. Now in this one, we can see that this one is the cobalt versus yellow because we have all this almost purple bluish tone in the shadows and in the blacks, and we have that yellowish tone in the highlights, which isn't quite natural. So this one is basically the same style as in this one. Now in this other photo, we can see what she does when she has a bit of blues and a bit of greens in her image. Now, she normally does shoot mostly urban street photography, but in this case, this one is shot maybe in her travels or something like that. Now, the mountains, overall, you can see how black and white they are. They're completely desaturated. Any haze, any blue haze that the mountains may have is completely desaturated. And also the greens, well, they're basically gone. They're desaturated. And then the yellows, well, the yellows control a lot of the greens in Sony cameras. They're tending towards the yellowish tones. So she's blending them up in the HSL. Now, another thing that we can notice is that the aquas, she maintains them, but she darkens them quite a bit and desaturates them just a bit and tends them towards a more of a dark bluish tone. So this is a very nice photo over here. Now, if we keep scrolling down, we can see that she's very adept or very good at capturing certain moments in street photography. After all, that's what street photography is, capturing the moment, and there's nothing too much that is very planned on her images. Most of them are just random shots of people and capturing certain expressions, just waiting for the precise time to take the shots. For example, in this one, this is an old man waiting in a cafe, just enjoying his cigarette and his book, and look at this beautiful expression that she captured in this man. Now, you can see that his face has some retouching. I already made a short about a retouching that MONARIS uses. I'll link it up here in the cards in case you want to check it out. So today we're gonna dive into the advanced editing tools within Lightroom. We're just gonna create the looks or the color grading. Now, if you want another in-depth tutorial on the advanced editing using gradients, grouping, masks, and using the brush tools, all of that, I already made a tutorial about that. I'll link it up here in the cards again in case you want to check it out. Once again, capturing the moments over here, this little girl just peeping out of the car, this woman just embracing her kid and her bag as well. Yeah, so it's a beautiful style. Now, right here, we can see another variant on her style. These photos over here, you can see that they have a more warmish cast to them. First of all, this one, well, it's working with color contrast. Once again, we have a purple cast over in the shadows and in the blacks. Now, this is a very strange cast because it's not completely blue, it's more towards the purples. And then we have a very brownish tint towards the highlights and the midtones, indicating that this image was in a very warm day. Well, we can see that it isn't, it's basically pouring outside, so it's not a warm day, but we can see that purple cast over here, and then we can see those brownish colors in the highlights and in the midtones, complementing with the cardboard over here and with the suit of this old man. So this is a very brownish tint with purples in the shadows. Again, this one is basically edited the same. We can see that purplish tint in the shadows and then that warmish brownish cast in everything else. So this is a very nice style that works with more sunny photography, but also in indoor photography. This one is the same. You can see that this one, well, the train is blue, it's completely desaturated and darkened, but we can see that overall brownish cast in the windows and in the reflection. So this style is just a little variant on hers. So we have the three varieties that we're going to replicate. Otherwise, I will continue to break down and find new styles that I want to edit. So we're going to go with the base style, then we're going to create the cobalt with yellows, then the teal with yellows, and then the purple with warmish tones or brownish tones. So now we're going to jump into Lightroom and start editing, guys. But before that, if you want to skip this tutorial, remember that all these 4 presets that we're going to create are going to be added into the Edit Like preset packs, desktop and mobile versions. They're going to be linked up here in the cards in case you want to check it out, and also in the pinned comment down below. That's a way you can support me and you can achieve all the looks that we've created throughout the series, including Peter McKinnon, Alan Palander, MONARIS, Pau Clavero, Luis Glass, more than 45, I think already around 50 presets that we've created. You can just access them immediately with one single click by buying them in my shop. And also these 4 presets that we're going to create, I'm going to create the optimized LUT version so you can apply these filters onto your videos as well. So these ones are going to be added into the Edit Like LUT pack. You can also check it up here in the cards, and also you can find the Edit Like bundle that includes all the presets for desktop and mobile and the LUTs at a discount price. So having said that, let's jump into Lightroom and edit this, guys. Okay guys, once in Lightroom we have all these images. Don't worry, we're not going to edit all of them, we're just going to edit one, and then from there we can just apply the preset to see how it performs on other images. So let's start off by editing this photo. Okay, so this photo is a bit underexposed. Just pull up the exposure just a bit to see what we're working with, and let's start off by creating the base preset. Now remember, temperature, tint, exposure and contrast, I don't like to move them. These are the values that I'm going to leave at 0 and not going to be included into the preset. So when we apply the preset to different lighting scenarios, we can just adjust the white balancing, the exposure and contrast, so the preset works with different photos. So we're gonna go all the way down to basic corrections. And over here, first of all, what we want to do is achieve that more flat image and just bring back a lot of the highlights, and it'll bring up a lot of the shadows. So first of all, the highlights, I'm just gonna drop them down. So we have a lot more information in the highlights, just bring them down around the -25. The shadows, I'm gonna bring them up so we have more information in the dark parts of the image. Then the white, these ones I'm gonna go all the way down to the -100. We don't want any pure whites on our image, so there's no point in having them. And then the blacks, I'm just gonna leave them like that. Okay, presence, texture and clarity, remember that we want a more soft image, less digitally sharp. So if we zoom in, we can see that if we add some texture, it adds some sharpness. If we add some clarity, it does basically add some more contrast into small parts of the image. So what I'm gonna do is just bring them down ever so slightly, just bring it down to a -5 around in the texture and a -10 in the clarity. Now the image is just a tad less sharp. Now vibrance and saturation, I'm just going to desaturate them just a bit. Now vibrance and saturation are quite different. I already made a short about that, but in essence vibrance is a more intelligent tool where it saturates or desaturates without affecting the primary colors of our image. Meanwhile, saturation just affects everything at the same level. So I'm just going to pull down a bit of the vibrance, just around the -15% and maybe a -10 on saturation, just to make the image a bit more flat. Now next up, the tone curve. Now in the tone curve, we're going to create a point in the shadows and a point in the highlights. Now if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can always check out my video about the tone curve. I'll link it up here in the cards, and there you can learn every single detail about the tone curve. So right now I'm just going to pull down the shadows just below the diagonal to achieve a bit of contrast, and the highlights also pull them down just a bit. And the blacks, well, the black were just a tiny bit raised, so I'm just going to pull them up. And as you can see, the output is at 4, so it's just barely fading them out just a little bit. Okay, next we're going to go all the way down to camera calibration to achieve her tones. Now camera calibration is one of the most powerful tools to edit your photos because it alters every single pixel on your image. So if you want an in-depth tutorial about camera calibration, because it is a very complex tool, just check it up here in the cards. I highly recommend you to pause this video, go check out camera calibration so you understand what you're doing. So first of all, the red primary, we want to add a bit of yellowish tones into the skin. Her skins are quite yellow, so I'm just going to bring up a bit of the yellowish in her skin. Now we can see with this button on and off, and you can see just barely how the skin is a bit more yellow with camera calibration activated. Next up, we want to bring back a lot of the blemishes, a lot of the reddish tones in the skin. We don't want to go to the oranges because that's not her style. Her skins are a bit more yellow, but they do have a lot of blemishes and a lot of reddish tones. So we're going to bring back a lot of them by adding some positive green. Just go to around the 12%, something like that. And they should work in portraits quite nicely. Next up, in the blue primary, we want to achieve those aqua desaturated tones that she has in the blue. So we're going to go to the negatives. In this case, I'm just going to go to the -15 or something around that. And the saturation, just bring it down just a bit. We can see by clicking this button on off of camera calibration how it affects the blues. Here we have more deep blues, now we have more aqua-like tones. Next, we're going to go up to HSL, and here we're just going to add her color grading or her precise look that she has in some of the colors. So first of all, let's start off by changing the hue. Now the reds, well, we don't want them towards the purples over here. We want them towards more of an orangey-like tone. So we don't want to go too far. Maybe a +25 is just going to be perfect, or +21, something like that. Just change them a bit towards the oranges. Then the oranges, again, we don't want them towards the yellows over here, which turns everything into a bit of a green tone. We want them more towards the other side. Just going to go with a -7%. Just changing them a bit towards the brick-like colors. Then the yellows control a lot of the greens, so we want to go towards a more burnt down green. We don't want to go towards the emeralds. Just bring them down something around the lines of -20, -19. And greens, again, we saw that the greens weren't towards the emeralds or the natural colors, that were more towards the yellow. So we want to bring them down towards the negatives, something like that. Then aquas, the aquas want them towards more of a teal look, something like that. And the blues, we're going to go to the opposite towards the teals, once again with a -24, something like that. Now you can see by HSL, the change is very apparent on this blue sign over here. How it was very blue, now it's more towards the teal look. Now we're going to go and desaturate some of the colors. Now, first of all, magentas and purples, we don't see much of those colors in her images besides the cast that she adds after, so I'm just going to desaturate them all the way down to a -78, 79, something like that. Blues, well, blues and aquas are very desaturated on her images, but she then adds them in the color grading part or in the tone curve. So in this case, we're going to desaturate just a bit. So I'm just going to go all the way down to the -60s, something around those lines, and do the same with the aquas. Greens as well, we want to desaturate them just a bit, just around the -25, something like that. And then we're gonna go to the luminance. Now in luminance, what we're gonna do is just make the skin tones just a bit more flashy and a bit more highlighted, just because, well, that's what she normally does in post edition. She normally takes a lot of time editing every single photo. She goes in with her pen and starts creating masks and everything like that. In this case, we're just going to create an overall standard preset that will help with the skin tones in her images. So first of all, just bring up a bit of the skin tones in the reds towards a +12, something like that. Bring up the skin tones in the oranges around the +20s and the yellows, and that will do with all types of skin tones. Just bringing them up, just make them a bit more bright. We can see how they make more bright the skin of the subject, just like that. And this is basically the base preset. So I'm gonna save it, and then we're gonna create the different varieties on her style. So I'm gonna go to the left panel over here, hit the plus sign, create preset, and remember that white balancing, exposure, contrast, lens corrections, transform, all of them, we want them to be unchecked. We don't want them to be included in the preset. So we're gonna create it, and now let's start creating the varieties on her style. Okay, so first of all, let's create the cobalt style that she has, the very deep blues in the shadows and then the yellowish tones in her highlights. Now, having the base preset applied to this image, first of all, what we want to do is go all the way down to color grading. Now here we can add a color to the shadows, a tint to the midtones and into the highlights. And I already made a tutorial about this one. You can check it up here in the cards to dominate this tool. In this case, I'm just going to show you how to achieve her look. Now, first of all, in the shadows, what we want to apply is a very dark blue. So we're gonna go maybe with a hue just around bordering the magentas and the purples, something like that. I'm gonna go with 39. As you can see, it's a very dark blue. And then the saturation, just pull it down. It's too harsh right now. Just put it down around the 20s, just like that. So it's present, but it's not too much. Then in the midtones, I'm just gonna help out this blue with a bit of a lighter blue, so around this one, and add some saturation, not too much. In this case, I'm just gonna get just a bit of complementary colors, just because in the midtones a lot of the skin tones are going to be in this range, so we don't want them to be completely blue. And then in the highlights here, we're going to add that yellowish tint to it. So I'm going to go with a tint that is very bordering the greens, something like that, and then add some saturation around the 12%. Now in this image we don't have a lot of highlight, that's why it's not very apparent, but we can click this button on off to see what color grading has done, and it's just adding that bluish cast and yellowish cast into the image. But it's not quite enough, in particular because the shadows, well, they don't touch the blacks. The shadows is just a bit higher in the exposure range. Meanwhile, the blacks, well, they remain completely black. So what we're gonna do is go to the tone curve over here, select the blue RGB channel, and we're gonna create several points. First of all, we're gonna create a point in the shadows, in the midtones, and in the highlights, and then just gonna create a couple of more points over here. And what I want to do here is add some bluish tint to the blacks. Now this last point over here is gonna control the blacks, so I'm just gonna put it up, and now we can see how the blacks now have a bluish tint to it. Now I went too far, it's a bit too much. Just gonna move it just a bit up, just like that, not too much. And then I'm just gonna add maybe a warmish or yellowish tint into the highlights. As you can see, they're direct opposites right here, and the direct opposites in the color were yellows and dark blue. So I'm just gonna add a bit more yellow into the highlights, just down here, something like that. And now this style was a bit more contrasty. So what we're gonna do is go to the overall tone curve over here, just pull down a bit of the shadows, just a bit more, something like that, and pull up the highlights just ever so slightly, just like that, guys. Now we're gonna save it and apply it to different photos to see if you need to update some of the settings. So just gonna save it over here, hit the plus sign once again, create preset, just name it, and then hit create. Now let's see, in this image, this one should work quite nicely because it's at night. It's a very nicely exposed image. Let's see the preset, let's apply it. I'm gonna call it MONARIS Cobalt over here. And here we can see it applied. Now you can see the before and after of Y on our keyboard. And this is the results. Now we have that yellowish tint in the whites. As you can see in this original image, we have pure whites in this neon light or this incandescent light, and over here now they're yellowish. Now in the shadows and blacks, obviously we can see that bluish tint, dark bluish tint. That was what we were looking for, but overall we have that very nice contrast that she has in this particular style. Now the base preset, would look something like this, which is just bringing down a bit of the highlights, so we have a lot more information in the highlights, bringing up the shadows. But now with the Cobalt one, we have a more contrasty and more stylized look. So this is one of the variants on her style. Now let's go with the Teal look. Now back to the original image. Now we're going to create that Teal look. Now this one has the base preset already applied, and we're going to go all the way down to color grading. And first of all, we want to change those dark blues that we added in the Cobalt one for more teal like blues or mint. So first of all, the shadows. Now in the shadows, I don't want to go with the dark blues over here. We want something a bit more around the teal lines. So I'm going to go all the way down to the 208 with the hue. And the saturation, well, we don't want to go to the extreme. Maybe around a 10% or something like that. Very subtle, but it's just going to be just enough for this image. Next, in the midtones, again, we're going to try to complement these tones with a bit of a darker blue. And the saturation, just going to go again with the 10%. Then in the highlights, once again, we're going to go with a warmish tone, but not too green. In this case, we'll go more towards the oranges to make it a bit more of a teal and orange look. It's not a complete teal and orange, it's some strange variant that she has, but it is worth just applying a bit of orange into the highlight, something like that, guys. Okay, we can see the before and after, and it's looking a bit more of a teal cast to the entire image, but we're not quite finished. Let's go down all the way down to camera calibration, and let's make more emphasis on the teal look. Now, first of all, in camera calibration, what we want to do is add more saturation to the red primary. Now, first of all, what we want to do is make that teal look really start to pop up a lot more. So in blues, what I'm gonna do is just bring down more towards the aquas, all the blues, around the -30%, and then the saturation just gonna pump it all the way to the positives. As you can see, it adds a lot more of orange into the skin tones and into the image, but a lot more vivid overall aqua tone. So we're gonna go up around the 20 something percent, 21, 22. Then the red primary, what we want to do is add more yellows to this image. So what I'm gonna do, just go with the saturation up, and as you can see, we're adding more yellows into the mix of this image, and as a result, we're making the blues a lot more vivid, but also the skin tones. Look how they're more yellowish and orange. So we're gonna go not too much, maybe around a +40, something like that, not too harsh. And then what I want to do is maybe in the HSL, just add more saturation to the oranges. Just add the saturation to the oranges, to the positives, something around those lines. And maybe just add a bit more saturation into the shadows over here that we added. Not too much, something around those lines, around the 30%. Now it's looking quite nice actually. I'm just gonna save it and see how it performs on other scenarios. I'm just gonna save it, and this one's gonna be called MONARIS Teal. Now let's look at this image of these two chefs. Let's apply the MONARIS Teal look over here, and it's a very subtle edit right now. Maybe bring up a bit of the saturation, just a bit more, and there we have a very nice teal look. Look at this. It's looking actually quite nice. In the highlights, we have that warmish cast, in opposed to the original image, which was just pure white. Then we have that teal look overall. In the background of the appliances, we can also see that teal look that has appeared, and it's looking actually very nice, guys. Quickly, let's see how it differs from the Cobalt style. This is the Cobalt. Let's see now the teal look, and now we can see that teal look just appeared everywhere. Just gonna apply a bit more saturation to this one. I saved it too low, something like that. Yeah, I'm just gonna update the preset and just gonna click over it, update with current settings, and hit OK. Okay, two variants down, one to go, which is the moody brown with purplish tint in the shadow. So just gonna return to the original image once again. And now what I want to do is add that purplish tint in the shadows, and then that brownish tint into the midtones and into the highlights. So I want to go all the way down to color grading once again. In the shadows, just add that magenta vibe to it. Just gonna add some saturation and move this point around until we have a tone that really resembles MONARIS' style. So I'm gonna go around, just around those lines, and then just gonna add a bit of saturation, maybe around 15%. Now we can see that it has just a purplish cast to the shadows overall. Now this entire image is classified as shadows by Lightroom because it's very unexposed. Therefore, we can see that purple tint in every single part of the image. Next, in the midtones and highlights, we want to create that brownish tint. Now we don't have any brown in our color wheel, therefore we want to combine the reds and the oranges to create a certain type of brownish tint to it. So what I want to do in the midtones is add some reddish tone over here, something around this type of color, and the saturation, just pump it up around the 15% once again. Then in the highlights, just going to do the same, But in this case, I'm just going to combine it with a more of a yellowish hue to it, something like that. 55, and add some saturation once again. Now we can click this button on and off to see what we've done, and it's basically the image is a lot more warm. Now in this image in particular, everything is classified as shadows, but as we can see, if we pull up the exposure, those purples start to disappear, and then those brownish hues start to appear a lot more. So I'm going to save this preset and see how it performs on other scenarios. Create a preset, and this one is going to be called MONARIS Brown. Okay, once again we have this image. This one is with the teal. Let's see how it performs with the MONARIS Brown preset. Now over here I have it. Now let's apply it, and now we can see immediately how this image is a lot more brownish than the original. We can see those brownish tints in the highlights, and the overall highlights over here brown compared to the original white, brown in the umbrella, and then we have that purplish tint in the shadows, which is actually quite nice. This should work very nicely with warm and sunny days. Let's see in this other, first of all, let's start off with the base preset. As you can see, it's a lot more flat than the original one, which is a lot contrasty, very saturated. Now let's see the brown preset. Now here we have those magentas in the shadows, and then we have that brownish tint in the highlights. Very nice. The cobalt, as you can see, it adds that cobalt vibe to the image, and those yellowish in the highlights. And then the teal look, which adds that teal look into every single part of the image and really highlights the oranges in the image. Very nice actually. How about in this image? Let's see the base preset. Immediately we can see how the image is a lot more flat, a bit more cinematic. Then we're going to go with the cobalt, as this image is classified in the shadows, most of it. So if we pull the exposure up, we can see how the shadows and the blues start to pass away and give way towards the warmish tones, which is actually quite nice. Then we're going to go with the teal look. And the teal look looks fantastic as well. It just adds that teal vibe to the entire image. And finally the brown, which has that warmish tones into the whole image. It's looking actually very nice. Finally, let's see how the presets perform in this image. This one is a very nice street photograph that I took in Japan of this businessman just getting into the subway. First of all, the base preset. Immediately you can see how it's a lot more desaturated, more cinematic. Then we can apply the brown, and the brown is looking very nice. Notice how all the greens of the original image have been transformed into brownish tint, and the magentas have appeared in the shadows. It's a very nice image. Cobalt, very contrasty, and then the teal look. Yeah, fantastic guys. So guys, I'm gonna leave it right now because otherwise this video is gonna be 3 hours long and I don't want to waste any more of your time. Remember that the purpose of these tutorials is for you to understand how to color grade, and I'm not taking any authority on the style of MONARIS. I don't own any of her presets. Maybe she does all these types of color grading in her own way. This is just my way. So remember that these presets and these LUTs that we created throughout this tutorial are going to be added into the Edit Like LUT pack and preset packs in case you want to check it out. Links up here and down here, and you can also find the Edit Like bundle that includes all the presets and all the LUTs in case you want to support me. I'd be very thankful if you can do that and ensure I don't starve to death and I can continue to do this for the foreseeable future. Other than that guys, if you can't help me out that way, just consider giving it a like and subscribing, commenting down below any other video that you want me to make, share it with a friend if you think they might find it useful or helpful. That's going to be it for today. I'm Tony Fuentes, cheers to all of you, see you in the next one.